Ethan Cole never trusted anyone, not after watching people he once called family betray him for money and headlines. His mansion on the edge of Austin was his fortress for a reason. Cameras watched every hallway, motion sensors guarded every door. No one crossed his gates without leaving a trace. Or so he thought until the night he found something that should not exist. It was late, the city lights flickered below, while Ethan sat alone in his dimly lit office, a half-empty mug of coffee cold by his keyboard. He was scanning through system logs, routine checks to calm the itch in his mind that said something was always wrong when a folder caught his eye. No label, just a mess of numbers and letters that did not match any protocol he knew. He clicked once the file opened for a second. He thought it was a hallway feed, but the angle was wrong. Too low. Two private tiled walls came into focus, a mirror fogged from steam, and then movement of figures stepping into frame, small bare feet on cold tiles. His breath caught when he realized who it was. Elena Cruz, 23 years old, housekeeper. His most quiet employee, the one person who somehow made his sterile house feel warmer, just by being there. And now she was standing in his bathroom, or more precisely the small bathroom attached to the staff quarters, unaware of the tiny black eye above the shelf recording her every move. Ethan froze. The video showed Elena changing her clothes, peeling off her uniform shirt, folding it neatly before slipping into a faded sweatshirt. No sign that she knew she was being watched, no glance at the hidden lens. Just calm routine, as if privacy still existed in this house built on suspicion. His pulse pounded in his ears, anger sparked at the base of his skull. Who planted this? How did it slip past him? Only a few people could access his network so cleanly. His first thought was, Elena herself. Maybe she played innocent. Maybe she was baiting him for hush money. Blackmail, he had seen it before. People selling scandals to the tabloids, a billionaire's dirty secret always paid well. But then he remembered the stories, whispers among the other staff, that Elena was old-fashioned, stubborn about her beliefs, saving herself for marriage, too pure for the games this world loved to play. He rewound the video, watched again, searching for any sign that she was part of this. But there was nothing except a girl who had no idea how close she was to losing everything she protected so fiercely. Ethan's hands curled into fists. He should call his head of security, rip the whole system apart until he found the traitor. But the thought tasted wrong. If whoever did this was inside his circle, then any alarm would spook them. Files could disappear, proof could vanish. He glanced at the paused image on his monitor, Elena hugging her sweater to her chest, eyes down, soft hair falling over her shoulder. In that moment, she looked so small, so exposed, so heartbreakingly real. Ethan leaned back, mind racing. He needed the truth, not guesses or gossip, and for once, cameras were not enough. He needed to see what she did when she stepped outside these walls. No bodyguards, no walls, just her in the real world. That night, when Elena finished polishing the marble floor and slipped on her thin coat, Ethan was already parked down the block engine, running lights dim, a predator stalking his own prey, not to destroy her, but to see if she was truly the girl everyone believed her to be. As her small figure disappeared into the cold Austin night, Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. He told himself it was about protecting his house, protecting himself. But deep down, a voice he hated whispered that maybe he just wanted one thing he could trust to be good, even if it shattered him. Elena Cruz grew up believing that if she worked quietly, prayed faithfully, and hurt no one, the world might hurt her less in return. She was born in a border town in Mexico, her parents gone before she turned 10, leaving her in the care of an aging aunt who crossed into Texas with nothing but an old rosary and a promise to raise her niece right. By 23, Elena knew how to make herself invisible. She moved through the grand hallways of Ethan Cole's glass and stone mansion, like a ghost with gentle hands, her hair always pinned her uniform, neat even after hours of scrubbing floors and polishing glass walls that never stayed clean for long. The mansion sat on the edge of Austin, perched high enough to overlook the city's sprawl of lights and restless roads. Inside, it was cold, almost too clean, full of modern lines and expensive furniture that nobody touched. To the world, Ethan Cole was a genius who turned a college dorm project into an empire of cybersecurity tools that protected banks and billionaires alike. To those who worked for him, he was the man who never raised his voice, yet made everyone feel watched every minute of every day. They said he trusted no one, not since the wife who smiled at cameras while draining his accounts behind his back, not since the friend who sold confidential data for a cheap tabloid scandal that cost him millions and years of lawsuits. The staff learned quickly that Ethan noticed everything from a fingerprint on glass to a word spoken out of place. Elena knew this too, so she never spoke more than she had to, never lingered, never complained about the salary that barely covered her aunt's hospital visits. She lived in a cramped apartment on the east side with her Aunt Rosa, who coughed through the nights and whispered blessings over Elena's hair every dawn before she left for work. Some nights when Elena returned long after sunset, she would stand in the doorway of Rosa's room just to watch her breathe. She saved every extra dollar, dreaming of nursing school someday, telling herself it would come soon enough if she just stayed quiet, stayed untouched by the city's shadows. In the house, the only one who really spoke to her was Mr. Miller, the head house manager. Miller had been with the Cole family since Ethan's father owned the first mansion, long before the tech empire, back when Ethan was just a lanky teenager, avoiding fancy dinners with his parents' rich friends. Miller was trusted. He had keys to every door codes, to every alarm, a master list of what staff worked where and when. He was the one who told Elena where to clean, when to change linens, which rooms to avoid, if Ethan was home. Elena thought of him as a strict uncle, sometimes gruff, sometimes oddly kind, the way older men could be around young maids they thought too soft for the world. Ethan never paid him much mind anymore. After all these years, Miller was just another part of the house that always worked until it didn't. So when Ethan found that hidden camera feed, his first suspect was Elena, just for a second, the same way he suspected everyone, because trust was a weakness in his world. But in the days that followed, watching her walk out into the night with her small bag clutched tight to her side, slipping onto crowded city buses, Ethan felt something different, something dangerous. He wondered what it would be like to believe someone could be good for no reason except they chose to be. He wondered what it would cost him if that belief was wrong. In his mansion office, Ethan pulled up her employment file for the 10th time. No red flags. Perfect references. Local church connections. Small paycheck wired every 2 weeks to her aunt's hospital account, sometimes with extra cash deposits from Elena's side jobs, cleaning a laundromat on Sundays. No hidden debts, no suspicious contacts. Nothing that made sense if she was playing him. Everything that made sense if she was exactly who she seemed to be. He leaned back in his chair, remembering the brief moments they spoke in the kitchen when she refilled his coffee. The shy way she thanked him when he once offered her a winter coat. The way she looked when she thought no one saw folding napkins into perfect squares before leaving them beside his breakfast tray. The mansion outside his glass office was silent, spotless, secure, yet hollow, in a way that even Ethan could not ignore anymore. He had built it like a vault, so no one could steal from him again. But watching Elena on that hidden feed, he realized that sometimes what needed protecting most was not money, but people who still believed something pure was worth guarding. That night, when she left through the back gate, Ethan slipped into his car and followed his breath tight, telling himself this was about threats, about exposure, about control. But deep down, he knew he was chasing something else. something he could not name yet, but already feared losing before he ever held it. Ethan kept his distance at first, content to sit behind tinted glass and watch Elena slip through the city like a shadow no one bothered to notice. The first night he followed her, she boarded an old city bus at the edge of the wealthy neighborhood where his mansion rose like a fortress above the working-class streets. She sat by the window, head bent over a worn paperback she pulled from her small canvas bag. Ethan parked 2 cars behind the bus at every stoplight, his pulse steady, but his mind restless. When the bus reached the hospital district, Elena stepped off and pulled her coat tighter against the cold. She crossed the cracked sidewalk under flickering streetlights and entered a corner pharmacy. Ethan waited, engine humming, watching her through the rain-smeared windshield. She emerged 20 minutes later with a small brown bag clutched to her chest. Not jewelry, not electronics, just medicine, maybe. He trailed her as she walked another few blocks to a building that had seen better decades. Rusted iron balconies, faded paint windows taped to keep the wind out. She climbed the narrow stairwell to the 3rd floor. Ethan killed the engine and waited, eyes fixed on the single window that glowed faintly from the inside. He saw her silhouette pass behind the thin curtain. She didn't look out once, no sign she knew she was being watched. He told himself this was all he needed to see. She wasn't meeting a dealer or a blackmailer or some hidden lover waiting to split his money in court. She was just living a small life, a good one, but Ethan could not let it go. The next night, he followed again. This time, she didn't stop at the pharmacy, but at a church tucked between a pawn shop and a laundromat. She stepped inside alone and didn't come out for almost an hour. When she did, she paused on the stone steps and tilted her face to the dark sky, eyes closed, lips moving like she was whispering secrets to someone only she could see. The wind tugged her hair loose around her face, and for a moment, Ethan felt like an intruder in a private world he did not deserve to touch. Still, he stayed. On the 3rd night, Elena went straight home after work. Ethan found himself circling the block of her rundown building more times than he wanted to admit. He parked, engine off, fingers tapping the steering wheel. He did not know why he didn't just drive away. He could have left, locked his gates, filed a quiet report with the police, fired Miller and the security team, and rebuilt the entire system from scratch. But every time he pictured the fear that might flicker across Elena's face if she knew something inside him twisted painfully. He wanted to protect her without scaring her, without becoming just another man who stole her safety. On the 4th night, Ethan's chance came without warning. He watched her step off the bus and walk down a dark side street toward her building when a shape moved from the shadows near the dumpster. A man, taller than Elena, dirty cap, pulled, low hands shoved in pockets. Ethan's instincts flared as the man changed direction, cutting across the sidewalk to block Elena's path. She stopped short, clutching her bag. From inside the car, Ethan felt his breath freeze. He shoved open his door, crossed the street in a few quick strides, his shoes splashing through puddles. By the time he reached them, the man had backed Elena against a brick wall. Words too low for Ethan to catch, but the threat obvious in his posture. Ethan grabbed the man's shoulder and yanked him back so hard he stumbled into the streetlight's sickly glow. The man snarled something, but Ethan didn't bother listening. He stepped forward, voice calm, but sharp as a blade, told him to walk away now, or never walk anywhere again. The man saw the look in Ethan's eyes and bolted into the darkness without another word. Elena pressed herself against the wall, shaking. Ethan turned to her, wanting to close the space between them, but stopping himself. She stared at him, eyes wide, lips parted like she wanted to speak, but couldn't find words. He wanted to ask if she was all right, if she wanted him to call someone, but all he managed was a stiff offer to drive her home. She hesitated, then nodded once silent. In the car, Elena sat tense beside him, clutching her bag so tight her knuckles whitened. Neither spoke as Ethan pulled away from the curb, the city blurring past outside the windows. At a red light, she whispered, "Thank you," her voice hoarse. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, afraid that if he looked at her too long, he would say too much. When they reached her building, she paused with her hand on the door handle. She looked at him, then really looked, eyes searching his face for something she did not ask aloud. Then she said good night and slipped out into the dark, leaving Ethan staring at the empty passenger seat, her warmth fading like the echo of a prayer. After that night, something shifted between them. At work, Ethan found reasons to pass through the kitchen when Elena was there. He asked her questions he already knew the answers to, just to hear her speak. She kept her responses brief, but her eyes lingered on him longer than before, like she too was trying to read what lay behind the careful mask he wore for the world. Some nights he caught her humming softly as she wiped down counters, a small reminder that her world was not all fear and locked doors. Ethan told himself it was enough just to watch her from a distance to keep the monster lurking in his house at bay until he could expose it. But then came the day he caught Miller standing too close to Elena in the hallway near the back stairs. Ethan watched from the security feed as Miller leaned in one hand, braced on the wall beside Elena's head. Her shoulders stiffened, eyes darting away, lips pressed tight. She said nothing, did nothing, just endured as Miller's fingers brushed a loose strand of hair from her neck. Ethan's vision went dark around the edges. He slammed the laptop shut before he could see more. That night, he followed Elena again, but this time not for proof. This time to be sure he was close enough if Miller dared push further. When Elena left the house at midnight with a plastic bag of leftovers for her aunt, Ethan's car rolled slowly behind her. She did not know he was there, did not know he would have burned the whole city down to keep her safe if it came to that. In his mind, lines blurred between guilt and longing, protection and obsession. He hated himself for needing to see her safe with his own eyes, hated that she had become the only soft thing in a life sharpened by betrayal. Still, he could not stop. One evening, while he waited near her apartment, Elena came out earlier than usual. She did not see him parked in the shadows. She sat on the stoop beside her building, elbows on her knees, head bowed. From his car, Ethan saw her shoulders tremble. She was crying. He stepped out before he could think, his footsteps crunching on the gravel. She heard him and quickly wiped her face, turning away, as if hiding would make her pain smaller. Ethan crouched beside her, close enough to see the dark circles under her eyes. He asked her what was wrong. She shook her head at first, but then words spilled out in a whisper barely audible. She was tired. Her aunt's medical bills were climbing. Miller was making her shifts longer, corners tighter, eyes heavier. She could feel him watching her, touching her, cornering her when no one looked. Her voice cracked when she said she did not know what to do, that she could not lose this job, but could not survive the shame either. Ethan felt something in him snap. He promised her in that quiet dark that she would never have to be afraid again, that no one would ever touch her without her wanting it. She looked at him then, eyes wide and wet, searching his face for a lie, but finding none. She asked why he cared, why he was here at all. He wanted to tell her everything, the hidden camera, the files, the nights spent trailing her like a ghost. But the words stuck. Instead, he told her what was true, that sometimes a man has to guard what is good, because if he does not, he loses the last piece of himself worth saving. She did not answer him that night, only leaned her head briefly against his shoulder. Just once, long enough for Ethan to feel the tremor of her breath, long enough for him to know there was no turning back from this. As she stood and walked inside, Ethan stayed where he was, on the cold step, the city humming around him, the night alive, with secrets he could no longer hide. Ethan did not sleep the night Elena cried on the stoop outside her tiny apartment. He sat in his car long after her light went dark, fingers drumming the steering wheel, mind restless with a single truth he could not keep buried anymore. Miller was not just a nuisance or a leech on the payroll. He was a danger crawling inside Ethan's walls like mold. Ethan knew how predators worked, quiet, patient, feeding on fear and silence, counting on victims to stay too ashamed to speak. The next morning, Ethan watched Miller through the glass walls of his office. Miller moved through the house with practiced calm, clipboard in hand, nodding to the cooks, barking short instructions to the other maids. He paused by the stairwell where Elena mopped the landing. His eyes lingered on her bent shoulders just a second too long, the corner of his mouth twitching into something like a smirk before he walked on. Ethan felt rage coil under his ribs, but he forced himself to wait. He needed Miller to slip to show his hand. Cameras were no good anymore. Miller knew where they all were. So Ethan did the one thing he hated most. He trusted someone else. He called David Chen, his oldest friend, and the only person still loyal after the mess of his divorce and the corporate leaks. David ran the private security firm that handled Ethan's background checks. Ethan told David everything, every ugly detail except one. He did not mention the nights trailing Elena in his car, the silent stakeouts, the way his chest ached when she was near. David listened without interruption, then promised he would handle it quietly. Within 2 days, David sent proof. Miller had purchased 2 micro cameras from a discreet vendor 3 months ago, same model Ethan found on the hidden feed. Worse, the feed did not just stay on the local server. Miller had uploaded backups to a cloud account under a fake name carefully encrypted, but not enough to hide from David's team. The files were real, dozens of short clips. Elena folding linens, wiping bathroom tiles, changing shirts when she thought no one looked. Nothing overtly explicit, but enough for any gossip site to spin into scandal. Enough to humiliate her forever. Ethan sat alone in his office that night, the clips frozen on his screen. He could not stand to watch more than a few seconds at a time. He imagined Elena seeing herself this way, helpless, exposed. He imagined the shame on her face, the way she would shrink back into herself, all that quiet strength smothered by a single man's filth. Ethan closed the laptop with shaking hands. He knew what had to be done. The next morning, he confronted Miller in the back hallway behind the pantry, where no cameras pointed. Miller looked surprised at first when Ethan stepped close enough for him to smell the bitter coffee on Ethan's breath. Miller tried to play dumb, tried to shift blame, saying he had installed the cameras to protect the house from lazy maids, thieves, liars. He said Elena was probably stealing. He had seen her slip extra food into her bag, maybe more. Ethan said nothing until Miller's excuses ran out. Then he leaned in so close, Miller flinched and told him quietly that if he did not leave by sundown, every file, every device, every threat would be buried with him if necessary. For a moment, Miller's eyes flicked to the hallway exit, calculating. He must have thought about denying it all, thought about fighting back, but something in Ethan's voice made him step back instead. Miller left the house before dinner. Ethan paid 3 off-duty cops to stand by as silent witnesses just in case. They watched Miller load his battered sedan with boxes and folders, avoiding Elena's eyes as she scrubbed the marble floors nearby, oblivious to the trap unraveling behind her. But Miller was not done. That night, while Ethan sat in his office trying to decide how to tell Elena, an email notification pinged his phone. The subject line was simple: "Pay me or everyone sees." The sender's address was new, but the threat smelled stale. Miller wanted hush money for the files more than Ethan had ever paid for silence. Ethan stared at the screen, then at the folder David's team had already mirrored and wiped from the cloud. He typed no reply. Instead, He sent one message to David handle it. By morning, the email was gone. The blackmail trail traced back to a cheap burner laptop that David's people made vanish. Miller was out of Texas by the end of the week, leaving behind only rumors among the kitchen staff about why the old manager had vanished overnight. Elena never asked. She seemed lighter in the days after Miller disappeared, her shoulders less tense, her smile shy but easier to find when Ethan passed by. One afternoon, Ethan found her humming a quiet hymn in the laundry room while folding fresh towels. He stood unseen in the doorway for a moment, watching her fingers smooth the fabric into perfect stacks. He almost stepped forward, then almost told her everything, but the words tangled behind his teeth. Instead, he cleared his throat. She jumped slightly, then smiled when she saw him. They spoke of simple things. She asked if he wanted tea. He said yes, even though he never drank tea in the middle of the day. In the kitchen, she poured boiling water over cheap bags and chipped mugs. They stood by the wide counter as sunlight spilled through the high windows. For a moment, it felt like another life one where he was not her employer and she was not a maid, but two people sharing something ordinary. She asked him if he had family nearby. He told her no, not anymore. He asked about her Aunt Rosa and listened as she spoke softly about hospital bills, old stories of a woman who raised her on prayers and second-hand books. When Elena talked about her aunt, her eyes shone with a quiet devotion that made Ethan's chest tighten. He wanted to reach across the counter and touch her hand to say he was sorry for every secret he was still keeping, but the words did not come. That night, Ethan sat at his desk and opened the security logs again. The mansion felt too big, too cold a place designed to hold people at arm's length. He remembered what Elna looked like in the church doorway that night. He followed her face turned up to the sky, like she was asking for something he had never known how to ask for himself. He thought of the hidden camera, the files now gone, the thread erased, but the wound it left still raw. He wondered if he could tell her yet, wondered if she would look at him the same, if she knew he had seen her. Not as she wanted to be seen, but as someone vulnerable, unguarded, someone who trusted locked doors to protect her when he should have been the lock. Outside his window, the city glowed with promises and lies. Inside, Ethan closed his eyes and pictured the way Elena's voice had sounded when she thanked him for the tea, the way her fingers brushed his when she handed him the mug. He told himself he would tell her soon. He would give her the truth, all of it, even if it broke whatever fragile thing was blooming between them. For now, he sat alone in his fortress, waiting for the courage to open the door he had kept shut for too long. Ethan had always believed that some truths could be buried forever if you just paid the right price or shut the right door. But with Elena, every secret he kept felt heavier than the steel and glass walls that surrounded his life. Days passed, and Miller's name vanished from the staff's whispers. Yet the unease in Ethan's chest only grew because Elena's smile came easier now her laugh sometimes reached him from the far end of the kitchen. But the guilt sat like a stone under his ribs. One night, after a long meeting that left him drained, Ethan found himself standing outside the small laundry room where Elena often finished folding late at night. He could hear her soft voice humming something gentle, the same song he had heard before. He watched her from the hallway, her fingers deftly smoothing the fabric of fresh bed sheets, stacking them in perfect piles. He wondered if she ever dreamed of bigger rooms, brighter lights, places where men like Miller never existed, and men like him did not watch from the shadows too cowardly to say what needed saying. He stepped inside before he could change his mind. Elena startled a little when she saw him, but her smile came quickly warm, forgiving in a way he did not deserve. He asked if she could sit with him for a moment. No work, just talk. She hesitated only for a heartbeat, then nodded, setting her stack aside. and wiping her hands on her apron. They sat across from each other at the small staff kitchen table. The overhead light buzzed faintly, but the rest of the mansion was quiet, wrapped in darkness. Ethan found himself tracing the chipped edge of the wooden table, trying to find the right place to start. He told her there were things she deserved to know that he should have told her long ago. He told her about Miller, about the cameras she never knew watched her. He did not tell her every dark detail, but enough for her to understand the betrayal she had lived beside without suspecting. As he spoke, her hands tightened around the mug. She held her eyes wide and bright in the dim light. She did not interrupt, did not flinch or look away. When he admitted that he had known for weeks, that he had watched, that he had followed her into the nights, because he did not trust anyone, not even her. When he finished, the silence felt too big for the small room. He expected her to stand and walk out to call him every vile word he knew he deserved, but Elena only looked at him for a long moment, her eyes shimmering with something he could not read. Then she asked him why. Why had he really followed her? He wanted to lie, but the truth tumbled out raw and soft. He told her she made him believe, for the first time in years, that goodness was still real, that trust was not just a word people threw away when convenient. He told her he wanted to protect her, but he had not known how to do it without becoming the very thing she needed protection from. She listened, and when she finally spoke, her voice was so calm, it cut deeper than any anger. She said he should have trusted her with the truth sooner, that maybe she could have trusted him back if he had. She stood then, gentle and quiet, and he thought that was the end, that she would pack her small bag and disappear into the night as easily as she had come into his life. But she did not leave right away. She turned back at the doorway and asked if the files were gone, really gone. Ethan nodded once, promised her with all the certainty he could offer that no one would ever see what Miller had tried to steal. She thanked him for that, for keeping her safe, even when she did not know she needed saving. Then she said she needed time to think, to breathe, without feeling like walls were watching her. Ethan did not stop her when she walked away, though every part of him wanted to call her back. In the days that followed, her absence pressed into every corner of the house. He still heard her footsteps, even when they were not there, still found small signs of her careful hands, a perfectly folded napkin, a faint scent of lavender soap. The new maid Miller had once hired moved through the halls efficiently, but the warmth was gone, replaced by the cold order Ethan had thought he wanted. He threw himself into work. He met with lawyers, finalized new acquisitions, donated to local shelters, with money that felt like dust in his hands. He watched the community center where Elena sometimes volunteered, fixing broken light fixtures, helping elderly women fill out health forms. He donated under a false name enough to cover repairs they had needed for months. He told himself it was enough, that she was safe, that she had choices again, that she would never need to mop floors for men like Miller just to survive. But at night, when the city lights blurred outside his high windows, he wondered if she would ever forgive him for protecting her in all the wrong ways. Then came the letter slipped under his office door one late afternoon. A small envelope with his name written in careful handwriting he knew too well. Inside, Elena had written only a few lines. She said thank you for everything and for nothing at all. She said she was leaving the city for a while to stay with her aunt in El Paso, to rest, to think, to start fresh. She said she hoped one day he would understand that trust was a gift freely given, not a cage to hold someone tight. She ended with a single promise that if she came back, it would be because she chose to not, because he kept her trapped by secrets. Ethan read the note 3 times, then folded it back into the envelope and placed it in the top drawer of his desk. He sat alone for a long while, the mansion silent around him, the last place he wanted to be, yet the only place he could not leave. He knew he could not follow her now, not like before, not like a thief clinging to the shadows. He had to wait, to hope, to prove to himself he was more than the sum of locks and cameras and doubts. He thought about the way her voice had sounded saying his name, the way she looked at him when she asked why he cared at all. He wondered if there was enough left of him for her to come back to when she was ready to trust him not just as her protector, but as a man who could be good enough for the softness she guarded so fiercely. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole sat in his fortress with the doors wide open, not to let anyone out, but to remind himself that love could not be locked away forever, no matter how hard he tried. Elena stayed away longer than Ethan had prepared himself to bear. Days turned into weeks, weeks folded into months. Winter softened into spring, but the cold in the big house never lifted, not really. Ethan kept working because work was what he did best when life threatened to feel too much. Contracts signed, new accounts protected, more millions added to numbers that no longer made him feel safe. Nothing could not, when every polished marble floor reminded him of quiet footsteps that no longer echoed in his hallways. Not when every closed door whispered about trust he had lost by guarding it too fiercely. Sometimes at night, when the house was too silent, Ethan would find himself standing in the staff kitchen, fingers brushing the handle of the chipped mug she once used for cheap tea. He would remember her voice in that small laundry room, how she had thanked him for protecting her, while asking why he hadn't simply trusted her instead. He wondered if she was eating well, if Rosa's health was improving, if she had found work that didn't wear her down to bone and worry. He sent donations to the church in El Paso, where Rosa now attended Mass, careful to hide his name, but he never called. He never wrote. For once, Ethan Cole understood that sometimes you hold on tighter, by letting go completely. Then one evening, as dusk settled like a sigh over Austin, David Chen called him out of the blue. David had watched Ethan spiral enough to know when to intervene and when to leave him alone. This time, he wasn't calling about business. He simply said, "She's back." Ethan sat perfectly still in his leather chair, staring out at the skyline where neon lights flickered alive in the dusk. David's voice softened. "There's a charity event at the community center tomorrow night, the same one you funded secretly last year. She'll be there. If you want to see her, that's where you go." David didn't say more. He didn't have to. The next night, Ethan stood outside the modest brick building that glowed from within like a lantern against the dark. He had not stepped inside a place like this since his parents were alive, back when community centers meant bake sales and volunteers, back when he believed people helped each other for free. Now, he lingered by the entrance, watching through the tall windows. Inside, children raced past rows of folding chairs. Old women set out trays of simple food, men in battered jackets lined up for help filling out forms. And in the center of it all stood Elena. She wore a plain blue dress, hair pinned simply, no makeup, but the soft flush in her cheeks made her look like the warmth he had been missing all winter. She laughed as she handed a plastic plate to an elderly man, her hands moving with careful grace, her head tilting when she listened to people speak. Nothing about her was grand, yet everything about her shone with a quiet certainty that made Ethan's chest tighten so sharply he almost turned away. He stayed where he was until she saw him. It took her a moment, her eyes scanning the doorway, catching on the shape that did not belong. When their gazes met, she did not smile at first. She only watched him, her lips parted slightly, as if trying to decide what to feel. Then someone called her name, and she turned away, busy again, his presence folded neatly into the shadows. Ethan stepped inside anyway. He moved through the small room like an outsider, nodding politely at people who recognized the expensive cut of his jacket, but nothing else about him. He watched her from a quiet corner, watched her listen and laugh and bend down to help an old woman pick up dropped papers. For a moment, he wanted to leave to disappear before he ruined whatever peace she had rebuilt for herself. But then, he remembered her letter. The last words she wrote. If she came back, it would be because she chose to. If she stayed away, it would be because he gave her no reason to trust him again. So Ethan stepped forward, waited until she stood alone by a table stacked with pamphlets about English classes and food assistance. She felt him before she saw him. When she turned, her breath caught audibly enough for him to hear over the soft buzz of conversation. Ethan said her name just once, like a question and a promise all at once. She did not back away, but she did not step closer either. He told her he didn't want to steal her time, that he only came to see with his own eyes that she was all right. She asked if he really wanted the truth, or only what would let him sleep better at night. He almost smiled at that, the soft steel under her gentle tone. He told her he wanted only what she was willing to give. She asked him if he still watched everything, still locked doors and checked cameras and trusted no one. He looked around the small community center, its peeling paint and cracked linoleum floors that somehow felt more like home than the polished cold marble back at his house. He told her he still watched some things, but only what mattered. He said he had dismantled half the cameras, fired the old security contractors, built new firewalls. He didn't even bother to test because he no longer cared if people saw him vulnerable. She studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to see if the man who stood in front of her was the same man she left behind, or someone new. He did not reach for her, did not beg. He simply waited, standing still in a place he could not control, hoping she could feel what he could not yet say. Then she told him that trust was not about secrets or surveillance. It was about showing up when it cost you comfort. She asked him what he wanted from her now. Ethan's answer came out quieter than he intended. He told her he wanted nothing she did not want to give, that he came to say thank you for teaching him something he should have learned long ago, that protecting what is good means letting it breathe, not trapping it in locked rooms and hidden files. She asked him if he was lonely in that big house. He said yes, but less than before. Because some nights he heard her voice in the walls reminding him that silence was not safety, that warmth was not weakness. For a heartbeat, they stood so close he could smell the faint soap on her skin, see the tiny scar near her hairline he had never noticed before. She told him she did not come back for him, that she came back for herself, for the people in this room who needed her to believe in good men, even if she was not ready to trust him yet. He said he understood that he would wait as long as it took. He told her that if she ever needed him again, not as a shield, but as a partner, she only had to ask. Her hand brushed his sleeve light as a confession. She said maybe she would. Maybe not tonight, but someday when the walls no longer needed to keep them apart. And for Ethan, that was enough. He left her there in the hum of soft voices and warm laughter. He stepped back into the cool night air with a heart that felt lighter than it had in years. Outside the community center, he looked up at the stars scattered above the city skyline, a man who once believed locks and cameras could keep betrayal at bay, but now knew the only fortress worth building was the one someone chose to stay inside freely. He drove home in silence, no shadows at his back, no secrets buried under marble floors, only the quiet promise that maybe trust could grow back if given enough space to breathe. Weeks passed, but the memory of that night at the community center lingered like the faint smell of soap on a shirt collar, long after it had been washed and folded away. Ethan moved through his house, noticing how empty it felt without fear to fill every corner. He did not reinstall the cameras. He did not replace the locks with new codes. Instead, he let the big windows stay uncovered some nights just to see the city breathing beyond his walls. He still worked contracts, meetings, numbers lined up in rows like obedient soldiers, but none of it held the same power it once did. He found himself checking the community center's small website sometimes late at night. He would see a photo someone posted of Elena reading to a circle of children or handing out donated coats to elderly women who smiled at her like she was hope dressed in simple clothes. He did not call. He did not drive by in the dark. He kept his promise. He waited. Then, one bright Sunday afternoon, when the air smelled of spring and new starts, a knock echoed through the quiet of his front hall. Ethan almost ignored it, thinking it was a courier or a neighbor's lost package, but something in his chest told him to look. He opened the heavy door, and there she stood, Elena, hair tied back the same way it always was when she worked, but wearing no uniform now. Just jeans and a simple blouse the color of new leaves. She looked at him the way she had that night when she asked him if he was lonely, and he could not lie. He asked her if she wanted to come in. She stepped past him without waiting for permission, like she had every right to stand in the center of all that marble and cold stone. She told him she had a question, one she had carried since the first night she found out he had followed her. She asked if he would ever stop trying to protect her. He could have answered with easy words, but instead, he told her the truth, that he would not stop caring, but he would stop guarding her like something fragile. He said he wanted to stand beside her, not in front of her, blocking the wind. She smiled, then small but real. She told him Rosa was better now that she was finishing her classes, that she wanted to start something new. She asked if he would help her build it, not alone, but together. A place for women like her who had nowhere safe to work, nowhere safe to sleep, nowhere safe to tell the truth. Ethan said yes before she could finish the thought, because this was the kind of protection that did not smother or spy, but lifted. She laughed softly then, and the sound echoed through the stone hall like sunlight warming cold floors. He did not touch her hand yet. He did not rush forward. He let her stand there free as she had always wanted. And when she turned to leave, she said she would see him tomorrow early because there was too much work to do, to waste time on old shadows. When the door closed behind her, Ethan stood for a long moment, breathing in the echo of her presence. In that quiet, he knew some truths could never be locked away, that trust was not a door you bolt shut, but one you hold open, hoping someone chooses to walk through again and again. And sometimes they do. Sometimes they come back. Sometimes they stay.